This is Waste Media, and today I will be diving deep into the strange story of the Semi-Tropic Spiritualists, a spiritualist society founded in the early 1900s. They once had a compound here among these hills, but today almost no traces remain. Make sure to subscribe and click on the bell to be notified every time we post. Spiritualism didn't begin in LA, but it would find fertile ground here. The religion first emerged in 1848. In Hydesville, New York, two teenage sisters claimed they could communicate with ghosts through a series of strange sounds. Their rituals soon began drawing crowds. Newspapers began covering the story, and soon across the United States, mediums began hosting seances in parlors, theaters, and tents. A new belief system had arrived, one where death was no longer the end. It was only the beginning. At its peak in the late 1800s, there was as many as 8 million self-identified spiritualists in the United States. That was nearly 10% of the population. Spiritualists believed that the dead continued to exist in the spirit realm and could be contacted by mediums who relayed their messages through trances, automatic writing, and table-turning seances. Los Angeles was growing fast in the early 1900s, and so was the hunger for new philosophies and ways of life in the area. LA would quickly become a hotbed for alternative religions. In the summer of 1905, the Semi-Tropic Spiritualist Association officially incorporated in Los Angeles County. On paper, their mission was simple: to acquire, operate, and maintain a permanent camp for the practice of modern spiritualism. But what they created was something far stranger and more layered. A self-contained spiritual compound carved into the wild hills just north of Edendale, in what is now part of Echo Park's Elysian Heights neighborhood. The group purchased land on a steep slope near what is now Alessandro Street and Riverside Drive. The site was rugged and isolated, just barely outside the growing city's limits. Close enough to attract curious visitors, but far enough to avoid scrutiny from city officials. Their real estate agent, Peter Johnson, began selling lots to association members who would camp on weekends and eventually begin to build cottages. By late 1906, the county recorded the subdivision as the Semi-Tropic Spiritualist Tract. So right down here is the original tract of the Semi-Tropic Spiritualist group, and it went all the way up this hill, and right up there is the Landacre Cabin, which was one of the original structures that was built here during that time. I'm pretty sure these stairs are part of the original tract property here. These are probably built by the Semi-Tropic Spiritualist group to go up and down their land. They look super old, and they go all the way down probably to the street. The name Semi-Tropic sounds strange to modern ears, but in the early 20th century, it was a marketing term used to describe Southern California's climate to East Coast transplants who didn't quite know how to categorize it. It wasn't desert and it wasn't lush jungle. It was something in between. Semi-tropic suggested warmth, palm trees, and exoticism. That branding wasn't just cosmetic. It helped sell the dream of a peaceful, healthy retreat away from industrial America's clamor. Each lot was privately owned, had shared common spaces, like a park in the center known as Central Semi-Tropic Park. This was where they would host weekly lectures, musical performances, spirit readings, and nighttime dances. Speakers came from across the country, and the occasional outsider could pay to attend a seance. So, I'm walking over the land right now. That was all part of the original tract here. The park would have been somewhere probably down there, because the land's flatter. So that was probably where the amphitheater was, common areas, but there could have definitely been bungalows up on these hills as well. For a while, things were going smoothly, but by 1907, some cracks were beginning to show. On December 9th, 1907, the Los Angeles Times ran a story that caught the attention of many Los Angeles residents. 25 pounds of dynamite had gone missing from the Semi-Tropic Spiritualist campground. It had been purchased for the purpose of clearing tree stumps from the rugged hillside. The man responsible for the dynamite was named John Thorne. When asked where the dynamite had gone, John claimed he had safely hidden it beneath a pile of hay in a barn, then under his bed. Then somehow it vanished. Alarmed neighbors feared the explosives might be misused, and many reportedly fled the area in fear. Despite the controversy, no explosion ever occurred, and no culprit was ever identified. The explosives were never recovered. But the incident triggered deeper concerns. Some neighbors and rival spiritualist groups began accusing the Semi-Tropic Spiritualists of being disorganized at best, fraudulent at worst. While they presented themselves as a serious religious group, others alleged the tract was turning into a lawless hillside party zone. There were whispered accusations, alcohol served to minors, dancing until midnight, fights breaking out in the community hall. One opponent claimed that young girls were served whiskey, while revolvers were fired into the air outside. And then came the night when it all turned violent. On July 18, 1908, Deputy Sheriff Thorne entered Semi-Tropic Hall to investigate a loud party. What he found was a crowd of intoxicated dancers and rowdy guests. According to his account, he was kicked in the stomach, punched in the face, and thrown or perhaps dove through a window to escape the escalating brawl. The assailants were never identified, only listed in court records as John Does. The scandal exposed a divide that had been simmering under the surface. Within weeks, former allies of the group, including Dr. Adal Harman Patterson, a respected spiritualist physician, publicly disavowed the association. She claimed the group had been hijacked by opportunists like P.A.B. Kennedy and L. Ward, who prioritized entertainment over enlightenment. Patterson testified that the grounds had devolved into a Midway-style attraction, with drunkards arriving via the Pacific Electric red car, paying a 25-cent admission. The Semi-Tropic Spiritualists denied it all, but the damage was done. What had started as a sanctuary for alternative beliefs was now being framed as a magnet for vice. And for the public, the missing dynamite came to symbolize everything the group's critics had feared: uncontrolled energy, badly handled. After the scandals of 1907 and 1908, the Semi-Tropic Spiritualists faced more than just bad press. They faced the full weight of the law. In May of 1908, Los Angeles County passed a new ordinance requiring all mediums, clairvoyants, and palm readers to purchase a monthly license to operate, $30 a month, the equivalent of $1,000 today. For the Semi-Tropic Spiritualists, who had already invested heavily in land, infrastructure, and marketing themselves as a legitimate religious group, this felt like an existential threat. If they were forced to pay, they argued, then so should every church, preacher, and religious healer in the city. Two members of the group, Ernest C. Johnson and A.J. Spink, made their case before the Board of Supervisors. They emphasized the money already spent on the tract, building roads, installing a water system, constructing the central pavilion. They claimed they weren't entertainers or sideshow mystics. They were a religious community, entitled to the same protections as any church. They also argued that the new ordinance would hinder their plans to expand the site into a larger spiritual retreat and educational center. But not everyone agreed. Opposition came swiftly and from multiple directions. Hartley Shaw, a chief deputy district attorney, insisted that granting an exemption to this group and not others would be arbitrary and invite abuse. E. Campbell, a member of the California State Spiritualist Association, took it a step further, denying that the Semi-Tropic group had any affiliation with their movement at all. He claimed they were using the name Spiritualists to shield illicit behavior and attract paying guests under false pretenses. And yet, despite all the controversy, the Board of Supervisors ruled in favor of the Semi-Tropic Spiritualists. They were granted an exemption. The group may have won that battle, but the war was far from over. Just 2 months later, in July of 1908, Deputy Sheriff John Thorne returned to the property. He entered the Semi-Tropic Hall and encountered another rowdy gathering. According to news reports, a crowd of intoxicated young men attacked him without warning. Thorne was beaten badly, punched, kicked, his eyes blackened. He either fell through a window or jumped through it to escape again. No arrests were made, and again the group claimed innocence. Behind the scenes, internal fractures were deepening. On February 28, 1910, the city of Los Angeles formally annexed the Semi-Tropic Spiritualist tract. The wild hills where mediums once gathered and dances went late into the night were now officially part of a growing metropolis. And with annexation came rules, building codes, taxes, public ordinances, and tighter enforcement of everything from land use to liquor laws. The group lost much of its autonomy. The city's growing bureaucracy meant that gatherings at Semi-Tropic Park were now subject to inspection, permitting, and public scrutiny. The sense of being removed from the city's grip, The very thing that had drawn the spiritualists there in the first place was gone. Attendance waned. Police raids, court appearances, and public criticism had taken their toll. Some of the founding members passed away, and others quietly moved on. There was no final gathering, no closing ceremony, no fire to cleanse the land. The movement didn't end in one moment. It dissolved gradually under pressure from modern life. By the time Pacific Electric's red car stopped running its Edendale line in 1940, the last traces of the group had already been paved over, built upon, or forgotten. The Semi-Tropic Spiritualists may have faded from the hillside, but the spirit of the place never really left. These steep hills of Echo Park have always attracted outsiders and eccentrics. In the early 1900s, it was the spiritualists, mediums, and mystics. But as the city expanded, another kind of outsider began arriving. Artists and writers were drawn to the quiet hillside. Elysian Heights would become a haven for creative types. That's the landscape Paul Landacre stepped into in 1932. Though the seances had stopped, the impulse behind them, a desire to connect to something deeper, to live differently, was still alive in the hills. Landacre, a quiet, meticulous artist, bought a modest cabin on El Moran Street. It was one of the last remaining structures from the original Semi-Tropic tract. The home was built in 1909 and is now known as the Landacre Cabin. When Landacre and his wife Margaret moved in during 1932, the house was modest, even primitive. Just 758 square feet, with a single wall of redwood construction and no modern foundation. But to Landacre it was perfect, secluded and silent, wild. From this small perch surrounded by native oak, he created some of the most refined and technically precise wood engravings in American art history. Landacre's prints often depicted stylized California landscapes, rolling hills, sparse trees, and wide skies. Using traditional linoleum and wood blocks, he carved each design with painstaking detail, then hand-printed them using a 19th century Washington hand press. His work was collected by MoMA, the Whitney Museum, LACMA, and the National Gallery. But Landacre's life would end tragically. After his wife's sudden death in 1963, he attempted to take his own life in a home explosion in the kitchen. He survived the initial blast, but would later succumb to injuries 2 weeks later. For decades, this cabin sat abandoned, hidden from view and overgrown with vines. As recently as 2024, the cabin appeared to be completely abandoned, although the city had designated it a historic cultural monument. But it now appears that the home has been completely renovated and remodeled. It is currently on the market for $1.5 million. And so I'm getting close to the Landacre Cabin right now, and it was recently renovated, and it's on sale now for $1.5 million. And I also have a video on the Theosophist Society in Beechwood Canyon, so if you like this video, you might like that one too. And I'll put the link for that right here. And that was a Theosophist Society in Beechwood Canyon during the 1920s. Charlie Chaplin, all types of celebrities from that time were kind of involved. Here it is right behind me, Paul Landacre Cabin. It does look like someone purchased the property already. There's a do not disturb occupant sign, so I think someone's living there already. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. Helps the channel a lot. Check out the Patreon. I've got exclusive videos on there. There's a whole exclusive series. So this was all part of the original tract. There's no signs of anything anymore. There's this whole new development down here. I don't know, possibly there could have been tents this high up, or little bungalows before. The Semi-Tropic Spiritualists are gone, but these hills remain. The history lives on through stories and structures. Thanks for watching.